Marcus Chen walked through the busy airport terminal with his small backpack over one shoulder. He wore faded jeans, white sneakers, and a simple gray hoodie. Nothing about his appearance screamed wealth or success. That was exactly how he liked it. At 45 years old, Marcus had learned that expensive clothes only attracted unwanted attention. He preferred to blend in, to be just another traveler heading to his gate. The flight from New York to London would take 7 hours. Marcus had flown this route hundreds of times for business. As the founder and CEO of Chen Global Technologies, he traveled constantly. His company designed software systems that made airplane flights safer. Over 200 airlines around the world used his technology. But Marcus never mentioned this to strangers. He never flashed his wealth or demanded special treatment. At the gate, Marcus waited patiently with other passengers. He pulled out a worn paperback novel from his backpack. The book had bent corners and a cracked spine from being read many times. A young mother with 2 small children sat nearby, struggling with bags and strollers. Marcus stood up and helped her fold one of the strollers. She thanked him with a tired smile. He nodded and returned to his seat. When boarding began, Marcus walked down the jet bridge and entered the plane. The first-class cabin was quiet and spacious. Soft lighting gave everything a warm glow. Large leather seats were arranged in pairs with plenty of legroom. Marcus found his seat, 2A, next to the window. He stored his backpack in the overhead compartment and settled in. He placed his book on the small table and pulled out his laptop. A few minutes later, a woman entered the first-class cabin. Rachel Morrison was 32 years old and dressed like she wanted everyone to know she had money. She wore a cream-colored designer suit that probably cost more than most people earned in a month. Diamond earrings sparkled at her ears. Her handbag had a famous logo printed all over it. She dragged an expensive suitcase behind her, the wheels clicking against the cabin floor. Rachel stopped at row 2 and looked at her boarding pass, then at Marcus. Her nose wrinkled slightly as if she smelled something unpleasant. She glanced at the seat number above Marcus's head, then back at her ticket. Without saying a word, she put her bag in the overhead bin and sat down in seat 2B, right next to Marcus. Marcus felt her eyes on him. He had experienced this look many times before. It was a look that said, "You don't belong here." He kept his eyes on his laptop screen and continued typing an email. He had learned long ago that the best response to silent judgment was no response at all. A flight attendant approached their row. Her name was Jennifer Hayes, and she had worked for the airline for 12 years. She was 38 years old with blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her uniform was crisp and professional, but her smile disappeared when she looked at Marcus. "Excuse me, sir," Jennifer said, her voice sharp. "I think you might be confused. This is the first-class cabin. Can I see your boarding pass, please?" Marcus looked up from his laptop. He had heard these words before on other flights, in other first-class cabins. He reached into his hoodie pocket without saying anything and pulled out his boarding pass. He handed it to Jennifer calmly. Jennifer took the pass and studied it carefully. She looked at the seat number, then at Marcus, then back at the pass. She held it up to the light as if checking for forgery. Rachel watched this scene with growing interest, leaning forward slightly in her seat. "This says seat 2A, Jennifer said slowly, as if Marcus might not understand. "Did you purchase this ticket yourself?" "Yes," Marcus replied simply. His voice was quiet and steady. "And how did you pay for it?" Jennifer asked. Marcus felt the familiar weight of frustration settle in his chest, but his face remained calm. "With my credit card," he said. Jennifer handed back the boarding pass but did not apologize. She did not say, "Sorry for bothering you," or "Thank you for your patience." She simply turned and walked toward the front of the cabin, her heels clicking against the floor. Rachel leaned toward Marcus slightly. "I guess they have to check," she said loudly, making sure other passengers could hear. "You know, with all the ticket fraud these days." She laughed, a high, artificial sound. Marcus said nothing. He folded his boarding pass and put it back in his pocket. He returned his attention to his laptop, his fingers moving across the keyboard. Rachel pulled out her phone. She angled it toward Marcus and took a photo, being obvious about it. Then she started typing rapidly, probably posting to her social media. She glanced at Marcus again and smirked. "I don't know how some people afford first class these days," Rachel said, speaking to the cabin in general but clearly meaning Marcus. "The standards have really dropped, haven't they?" A few other passengers looked over. Some nodded slightly. Others looked uncomfortable but said nothing. One older man in row 3 chuckled and shook his head in agreement with Rachel. Marcus continued typing. His jaw tightened slightly, but that was the only sign that he had heard her comment. Inside, he felt the old familiar anger, but he had learned to control it. Getting angry would only prove whatever they already believed about him. So he stayed quiet, stayed calm, and kept working. Jennifer returned a few minutes later. This time she had another crew member with her, a man wearing a slightly different uniform. He was the purser, the senior flight attendant on this flight. "Sir," the purser said, his voice formal and cold. "We need to verify some information about your ticket. Can you tell me when you purchased this ticket?" 3 days ago, Marcus answered, looking up at both of them. "And you purchased it online?" the purser continued. "Yes." "Can you show me identification, please?" Marcus reached for his wallet. He pulled out his driver's license and handed it to the purser. The man studied it carefully, comparing the photo to Marcus's face. Rachel pulled out her phone again. She held it up and started recording video. "This is crazy," she whispered loudly, narrating for her followers. "They're about to kick someone off this flight. Security's definitely coming." She laughed again, delighted by the drama. Other passengers were now fully paying attention. Some whispered to their travel companions. A few pulled out their own phones. The cabin filled with tension and curiosity. The purser handed back Marcus's license. "Please wait here," he said. "We need to verify this with the gate." Marcus nodded slowly. He had been through this before, but it never got easier. The assumption was always the same. A black man in first class must be a mistake. Must be fraud. Must be someone who didn't belong. He closed his laptop and picked up his book instead. He opened it to a random page and pretended to read. The words blurred in front of his eyes. He could feel everyone watching him. Then a voice came over the airplane's speaker system. It was the captain speaking from the cockpit. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard Flight 237 to London Heathrow. Before we begin our safety demonstration, I want to acknowledge that we have a very special guest with us today in the cabin." Jennifer and Rachel both froze. The purser stopped walking. Every passenger looked up at the speakers. Marcus closed his book slowly. A small smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He knew what was coming next. The captain continued, his voice warm and respectful. "Flying with us today is Marcus Chen, the founder and CEO of Chen Global Technologies." The cabin went completely silent. "For those who don't know," the captain went on, "Mr. Chen's company designed the aviation software systems that keep this aircraft and over 200 other airlines safe in the skies. Mr. Chen is traveling to London for the Aviation Innovation Summit, where he'll be speaking about the future of flight safety. We're honored to have him aboard." Rachel's face went pale. Her phone slipped from her hand and fell into her lap. She stared at Marcus with her mouth slightly open. Jennifer's confident expression crumbled. Her eyes went wide with shock and fear. The purser beside her looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Marcus picked up his book again and continued reading. He did not look at Jennifer or Rachel. He did not smile or gloat. He simply returned to his page as if nothing had happened, but everything had changed. And everyone in that cabin knew it. The silence in the cabin felt heavy, like a thick blanket had been thrown over everyone. Passengers who had been whispering and recording suddenly became very interested in their seats. They put their phones away quickly. They looked down at their laps or out the windows, anywhere except at Marcus. Rachel Morrison felt her heart pounding in her chest. Her hands shook as she grabbed her phone from her lap. The video she had been recording was still running. She stopped it quickly and stared at the screen. What had she done? She had just mocked and recorded Marcus Chen. The Marcus Chen, the billionaire whose technology her father's company probably used. Her mind raced with panic. Jennifer Hayes felt sick to her stomach. She stood frozen in the aisle, unable to move her feet. The purser next to her had gone completely pale. They had just interrogated a man worth billions of dollars. They had treated him like a criminal, like someone who didn't deserve to be in first class. And they had done it in front of a plane full of witnesses. From the cockpit, a man emerged. He wore the uniform of a senior airline manager with extra stripes on his shoulders. His name was David Park, and he was responsible for overseeing all first-class services on international flights. He had been in the cockpit talking with the captain when he heard about the situation developing in the cabin. David walked straight to row 2. He stopped in front of Marcus and smiled warmly. "Mr. Chen," he said, extending his hand. "It's a tremendous honor to have you flying with us today. I'm David Park, the senior service manager. We've been expecting you." Marcus looked up from his book and shook David's hand. "Thank you," he said simply. "You're traveling to London for the Aviation Innovation Summit, correct?" David continued. "We heard you'll be receiving the Lifetime Achievement Award this year. Congratulations." "I appreciate that," Marcus replied. He kept his voice neutral, not cold but not warm either. David glanced around the cabin. He noticed the tension in the air. He saw Jennifer standing stiffly in the aisle, her face red. He saw Rachel pressed back in her seat, looking terrified. He noticed other passengers pretending not to watch this conversation. "Is everything all right here?" David asked, looking directly at Marcus. "Has your boarding been smooth?" There was a pause. Everyone held their breath. Marcus could have complained. He could have gotten Jennifer fired on the spot. He could have demanded an apology in front of everyone. But that was not who Marcus was. "Just the usual assumptions," Marcus said quietly. "Nothing I haven't handled before." David's expression changed. Understanding and shame crossed his face. He had worked in this industry for 20 years. He knew exactly what Marcus meant by the usual assumptions. He had seen it happen to other passengers of color, and now it had happened to one of the most important people in aviation technology. "I see," David said, his voice tight. "I'm very sorry to hear that. If you'll excuse me for just a moment, Mr. Chen, I need to address something with my crew." David turned and looked at Jennifer. His eyes were hard and cold. "Jennifer, please step into the galley with me, now." Jennifer's face went from red to white. She nodded and followed David toward the front of the plane. The purser went with them. Their footsteps echoed in the silent cabin. Rachel watched them disappear behind the curtain that separated first class from the galley. She looked at Marcus, who had returned to reading his book. She wanted to say something, to apologize, to explain, but the words stuck in her throat. How could she explain what she had done? She picked up her phone again and opened her social media. Her earlier post was already getting attention. She had written, "You won't believe who just got caught with a fake first-class ticket, LOL. Security incoming." Below it was the photo she had taken of Marcus. Already there were 15 comments. Rachel started reading them and her blood ran cold. "OMG, Rachel, do you know who that is? That's Marcus Chen, the tech billionaire. Delete this now. Girl, you just ended your own career. That man is worth $4 billion. My dad works with Chen Global Technologies. You're going to regret this post." Rachel's hands shook harder. She tried to delete the post, but she had already shared it to 3 different platforms. People had already taken screenshots. It was spreading beyond her control. Her phone buzzed with a call. It was her father. She let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again immediately. Another call from her father. Then a text message appeared. "Call me right now." "What have you done?" Rachel felt tears burning in her eyes. She looked at Marcus again. He was still reading calmly, as if nothing had happened. How could he be so calm? She had humiliated herself, possibly destroyed her reputation, and he just sat there reading a book. In the galley, David Park faced Jennifer and the purser. His voice was low but angry. "What happened out there? Tell me exactly what happened." Jennifer tried to explain. "I was just checking tickets like we always do." He looked I thought there might be a mistake with his seat assignment. Did you check anyone else's ticket? David asked. Jennifer hesitated. Well, no, but did you ask anyone else how they paid for their ticket? No, but I was just being thorough. Were you being thorough? David interrupted. Or were you making assumptions based on how Mr. Chen looks? Jennifer opened her mouth, but no words came out. She knew the truth. So did David. So did everyone. Keisha Williams, the head flight attendant, had been listening from nearby. She stepped forward. Keisha was a black woman who had worked for the airline for 15 years. She had experienced the same treatment Marcus just received. Many times. You didn't check my ticket when I deadheaded in first class last month, Keisha said to Jennifer, her voice sharp. You didn't ask the white man in row 1 how he paid for his seat. You only questioned Mr. Chen. And we both know why. Jennifer started crying. I wasn't trying to be racist, I just thought. That's exactly the problem, Keisha said. You thought. You made an assumption. And that assumption was based on the color of his skin. David pulled out his phone. I'm calling security. We need to review the cabin footage from the past 15 minutes. And Jennifer, you're suspended effective immediately. You'll be escorted off this aircraft before we take off. Please, Jennifer begged. I've worked here for 12 years. I have a family. I made a mistake. But please don't do this. You didn't make a mistake, David said firmly. You made a choice. You chose to treat a passenger differently because of how he looked. That's not a mistake. That's discrimination. And we have a zero-tolerance policy. Jennifer collapsed into tears. The purser looked down at his shoes, knowing he was probably next. Back in the cabin, Rachel's phone would not stop buzzing. Text messages poured in from friends, family, and followers. Most of them were angry or disappointed. Her best friend sent a message. I can't believe you did this. Everyone knows who Marcus Chen is. How could you be so stupid? Her father called again. This time Rachel answered, her voice shaking. Dad, do you have any idea what you've done? Her father's voice was like ice. Marcus Chen's technology runs the software for my entire company. We have a $50 million contract with Chen Global. And you just publicly humiliated him? I didn't know who he was. Rachel whispered. That's exactly the point. Her father shouted. You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect. I taught you better than this. Your mother and I taught you better than this. Rachel started crying. Other passengers glanced at her but quickly looked away. She had wanted attention, and now she had it. But not the kind she had imagined. Near the window, Marcus turned a page in his book. He could hear Rachel crying softly next to him. He could feel the tension in the cabin. He had lived through scenes like this before. The shock, the apologies, the panic when people realized who he was. But Marcus had learned something important over the years. The apologies never came because people were truly sorry for how they treated him. The apologies came because they discovered he was rich and powerful. If he had been a regular black man in a hoodie, with no billions and no famous company, would anyone apologize? Would anyone care? That was the real problem, and that was why Marcus never forgot where he came from. A young voice interrupted his thoughts. A flight attendant, different from Jennifer, approached with a nervous smile. She held a folded piece of paper. Mr. Chen, excuse me, sir. A passenger from economy class asked me to give this to you. Marcus took the paper and unfolded it. The handwriting was young and careful. It read, Dear Mr. Chen, my name is Jamal Williams. I'm 16 years old. I saw what happened to you just now. I want to say thank you for staying calm and not getting angry. You showed me how to handle ignorance with dignity. My mom always tells me I'll face people who judge me because of my skin color. Today I saw how a real man handles it. Thank you for being an example. P.S. I want to study computer science in college. Maybe one day I can work for your company. Marcus read the note twice. Then he looked up at the flight attendant. Which seat is Jamal in? Seat 34B, sir. In economy. Marcus nodded slowly. Please ask Jamal if he would like to come sit in first class with me for takeoff. Tell him I'd like to talk to him about computers in college. The flight attendant smiled, a genuine smile this time. I'll tell him right away, Mr. Chen. As she walked away, Marcus folded the note carefully and put it in his pocket. Rachel watched this exchange from her seat. She saw the kindness in Marcus's action. She saw him helping a teenager who looked up to him. And she realized that Marcus Chen was everything she was not. He had dignity. He had grace. He had real class. Money could buy a first-class ticket, but it could not buy character. And Rachel was finally beginning to understand the difference. 2 security officers arrived at the aircraft door. They wore dark uniforms and serious expressions. David Park met them in the galley and spoke quietly. Jennifer Hayes stood against the wall, tears still running down her face. She had stopped trying to explain herself. There was nothing left to say. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us," one of the security officers said to Jennifer. His voice was professional but not unkind. Jennifer nodded. She removed her flight attendant wings from her uniform and handed them to David. Her hands trembled as she did this. 12 years of work, gone in a single moment. 12 years of flying, of serving passengers, of building a career. All destroyed because she made assumptions about a man in a hoodie. The other flight attendants watched silently as Jennifer was escorted off the plane. Some looked sad. Others looked angry. Keisha Williams stood with her arms crossed, her face hard. She had seen too many Jennifer Hayes types in her career. People who smiled at some passengers and questioned others. People who never thought their actions were wrong until they faced consequences. As Jennifer walked through the first-class cabin toward the exit, she kept her eyes on the floor. She could not look at the passengers. She could not look at Marcus Chen. The shame was too heavy to carry while making eye contact. Marcus did not watch her leave. He was reading his book, waiting for Jamal to arrive from economy class. Rachel Morrison sat frozen in her seat. She watched Jennifer's departure with growing horror. If a flight attendant with 12 years of experience could lose her job, what would happen to Rachel? She was not an employee. She was just a passenger. But the internet was forever. Those screenshots of her posts were spreading right now. Her cruelty was being shared across social media platforms, viewed by thousands of people. Her phone continued to buzz. Rachel finally turned it over so she could not see the screen, but she could still feel it vibrating against the armrest. Each buzz was another notification, another comment, another person seeing what she had done. A few minutes later, the flight attendant returned with a teenage boy. Jamal Williams was 16 years old and tall for his age. He wore a clean but faded t-shirt and jeans. His sneakers were old but well-maintained. He carried a worn backpack over one shoulder. His eyes were wide with nervousness and excitement. "Mr. Chen," the flight attendant said, "this is Jamal Williams." Marcus stood up and extended his hand. "Hello, Jamal. Please call me Marcus. Would you like to sit here for a bit?" He gestured to the empty seat across the aisle. "Yes, sir. Yes, Marcus," Jamal said, shaking his hand. The boy's grip was firm, the way someone had taught him to shake hands properly. "Thank you for inviting me up here. I've never been in first class before." "Neither had I at your age," Marcus said with a smile. "Sit down. Tell me about your interest in computer science." Jamal sat down carefully, as if the expensive leather seat might break. He set his backpack at his feet. "Well, I've been teaching myself to code for 2 years now. I watch YouTube videos and take free online courses. I built a simple app last year for my school to help students find study partners." Marcus leaned forward, genuinely interested. "What programming language did you use?" "Python, mostly, and some JavaScript for the interface." "Good choices for starting out," Marcus nodded. "Are you planning to go to college?" Jamal's expression became more serious. "I want to, but my mom is a single parent. She works 2 jobs. I'll probably need to get a full scholarship or go to community college first. I've been applying to every scholarship I can find." Marcus recognized this story. He had lived a version of it himself. His own mother had worked as a nurse, picking up extra shifts to help pay for his books and supplies. His father had worked in a factory for 30 years. They had sacrificed everything to give Marcus opportunities. "What's your grade point average?" Marcus asked. 3.9. I would have a 4.0, but I got a B in English last year. Writing essays isn't my strong point. Math and science are solid? Yes, sir. All A's in those. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. He wrote something on the back and handed it to Jamal. This is my personal email address. I want you to send me your transcript, your resume, and a list of colleges you're interested in. Can you do that? Jamal stared at the card like it was made of gold. Really? You want me to email you? I do. Chen Global Technologies has a summer internship program for high school students. It's paid, and we provide housing if you need it. I think you'd be a good fit. Jamal's eyes filled with tears. He blinked them back quickly. I don't know what to say. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet. You still have to apply and interview. But I'll make sure your application gets reviewed personally. If you're as good as I think you are, you'll earn that spot. Rachel listened to this conversation from her seat. She felt something twist in her chest. Guilt? Shame? Envy? Marcus Chen was giving this teenager an opportunity that could change his entire life, and he was doing it with such casual kindness, as if it was no big deal. What had Rachel ever given anyone? She posted photos of her expensive lifestyle online. She judged people by their clothes and their seats. She laughed at people she thought were beneath her. She had never once offered to help someone who needed it. The plane's engine started to hum. The captain's voice came over the speaker again. Flight attendants, prepare for departure. Jamal stood up. I should get back to my seat. Send me that email as soon as you land, Marcus reminded him. And Jamal, keep your head up. You're going to face a lot of people who make assumptions about you because of how you look or where you come from. Don't let them change who you are. Use their doubt as fuel. That's what I did. I will. Thank you, Marcus. Jamal walked back through the cabin toward economy class. Several passengers watched him go. Some of them had heard the conversation. They looked at Marcus with new respect. This was not just a rich man. This was someone who remembered where he came from and helped others climb the same ladder. The flight attendants began the safety demonstration. A new attendant, not Jennifer, went through the motions of showing passengers how to use seatbelts and oxygen masks. Rachel barely paid attention. She was lost in her own thoughts, her own growing panic. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from her modeling agency. Rachel's stomach dropped. She was not a professional model, but she did some influencer work and brand partnerships. Those partnerships paid well and gave her the lifestyle she loved to show off online. She answered the call with a shaking voice. Hello? Rachel, this is Monica from the agency. We need to talk about your social media posts from today. I know, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. A mistake? Monica's voice was sharp. Rachel, 3 of your sponsors have already contacted us. They're pulling their contracts. They don't want to be associated with someone who publicly mocked a respected businessman, especially not someone who did it because of racial bias. It wasn't racial bias. I just didn't know who he was. That's exactly what makes it worse, Rachel. You treated him that way because you assumed he didn't belong in first class. Do you understand how that looks? Rachel started crying again. Please, Monica, I'll delete everything. I'll apologize publicly. I'll do whatever you want. It's too late for that. The screenshots are everywhere. Someone even made a hashtag about you. We're going to have to drop you from our roster. I'm sorry, Rachel, but we can't represent you anymore. The call ended. Rachel sat there holding her phone, staring at the blank screen. Her career was over. Her sponsors were gone. Her agency had dropped her, and it had all happened in less than an hour. She looked at Marcus again. He was typing on his laptop now, working on something important. He looked completely unbothered by everything that had happened. How could he be so calm? How could he just move on? Rachel did not understand that Marcus had practice. He had been judged, questioned, and doubted 1,000 times before. This was just another Tuesday for him. He had learned to let the ignorance roll off his back like water off a duck. But for Rachel, this was new. She had never faced real consequences before. She had always been protected by her family's money and her social status. Now, for the first time in her life, She was facing the reality of her own actions. The plane began to move, pulling away from the gate. Through the window, Rachel could see the terminal getting smaller. She was leaving New York, but her problems were coming with her. They were posted online for the world to see. They were shared, commented on, and judged by thousands of strangers. A flight attendant came by with drinks. She served Marcus first, offering him champagne or juice. Marcus chose water. Then she turned to Rachel. "Ma'am, would you like something to drink?" Rachel looked up at the flight attendant. For a brief moment, she thought about how this woman had probably heard everything. She had probably seen Rachel's cruel comments and recordings. And yet here she was, still doing her job, still offering service with a polite smile. "Water, please," Rachel whispered. The flight attendant poured her a glass and moved on. Rachel held the cold glass in her hands and stared at it. She thought about Jennifer Hayes, who was probably sitting in a security office right now, explaining why she should not be fired. She thought about Jamal Williams, who was sitting in economy with a business card that could change his future. She thought about Marcus Chen, who had every right to be angry, but chose grace instead. And she thought about herself. Who was she really? Without her followers, without her sponsors, without her carefully curated online image, who was Rachel Morrison? She was starting to realize she did not like the answer. The plane lifted off the runway, climbing into the sky. Rachel looked out the window at New York disappearing below. Somewhere down there, her phone was still buzzing with notifications. Her reputation was crumbling in real time. Her life as she knew it was falling apart. And there was nothing she could do to stop it. The flight to London would take 7 hours. 7 hours to sit next to the man she had humiliated. 7 hours to think about what she had done. 7 hours to realize that sometimes, the person you hurt the most is yourself. The plane reached its cruising altitude over the Atlantic Ocean. Most passengers settled in for the long flight. Some read books. Others watched movies on their seat screens. A few tried to sleep, but Rachel Morrison could not do any of these things. She sat rigid in her seat, her mind racing with panic. She finally gathered the courage to look at her phone. What she saw made her stomach turn. The hashtag trending about her was harsh and unforgiving. Thousands of people were sharing her story. They were calling her privileged, racist, and cruel. Screenshots of her old posts were being dug up and reposted. Comments she had made months or years ago were suddenly being examined under a spotlight. One post from last year showed her complaining about a housekeeper at a hotel. Another showed her making fun of someone's clothes at a restaurant. A third showed her rolling her eyes at a public bus passing by her expensive car. Each post alone might have been forgotten, but together they painted a picture of who Rachel really was. And it was not a pretty picture. Her followers were disappearing. She refreshed her profile and watched the number drop. 23,000 followers. Refresh. 22,000. Refresh. 21,000. People were abandoning her account like rats leaving a sinking ship. The comments were brutal. "This is what privilege looks like." She finally got exposed. "I always knew she was fake." Good riddance to another entitled influencer. Rachel's father sent another text message. "Your mother is crying. Do you understand what you've done to this family? The company board is talking about removing you from all official positions. Come home immediately when you land." Her fiancé, who had proposed just 3 months ago, sent a short message. "I need some time to think about us. This isn't the person I thought I was marrying." Rachel felt like she was drowning. Everything she had built, every relationship she valued, every opportunity she enjoyed, all of it was crumbling. And the man responsible for her downfall was sitting right next to her, calmly working on his laptop. Except Marcus Chen was not responsible. Rachel knew that. She was responsible. She had taken the photo. She had written the mocking posts. She had laughed when Jennifer questioned Marcus. She had recorded video with cruel commentary. Every action had been her choice. Rachel looked at Marcus again. His face was calm, focused on his screen. He typed steadily, occasionally pausing to think. How could he be so peaceful? She had tried to humiliate him in front of dozens of people, and yet he acted like nothing had happened. She did not understand that Marcus had developed this calm over many years. He had been the only black student in his MIT computer science program. He had been questioned by security when entering his own office building. He had been assumed to be the help at business conferences where he was actually the keynote speaker. He had learned to save his energy for battles that mattered. A few rows back, other passengers were having quiet conversations about what had happened. Word had spread through the cabin. Everyone knew about Jennifer being escorted off the plane. Everyone knew about Rachel's posts going viral. And everyone knew that Marcus Chen had handled it all with remarkable grace. One older woman leaned across the aisle to her husband. "Did you see how kind he was to that young boy? A billionaire taking time to mentor a teenager from economy class? That's real class right there." Her husband nodded. "And that girl next to him should be ashamed of herself. Did you hear what she said earlier? Disgusting." Rachel heard these whispers. Each one was like a knife cutting deeper into her pride. She had wanted attention and admiration. Now she had attention, but it came with shame and disgust. 3 hours into the flight, Rachel could not take it anymore. She had to say something. She had to apologize. Even if Marcus did not accept it, even if it did not fix anything, she had to try. She took a deep breath and turned toward him. "Mr. Chen?" Marcus looked up from his laptop. His expression was neutral, neither friendly nor hostile. "Yes? I need to apologize to you." Rachel's voice cracked. "I'm so sorry for what I said earlier, for the photos and the posts, for laughing when that flight attendant questioned you. I was wrong, completely wrong." Marcus studied her for a moment. "Why are you apologizing?" The question surprised Rachel. Because I treated you terribly. Because I was cruel and judgmental. But would you be apologizing if you didn't know who I was? Marcus asked quietly. If I was just a regular man in a hoodie with no money or fame, would you still feel sorry? Rachel opened her mouth, but no words came out. She had not thought about it that way. Marcus continued, his voice calm but firm. That's the problem. You're not sorry for how you treated me. You're sorry for who I turned out to be. There's a big difference. I don't know what to say. I do, Marcus said. This wasn't about me being a CEO or a billionaire. This would have been wrong even if I was a teacher or a nurse or unemployed. Every person deserves respect, not because of what they own or what they've achieved, but because they're human. Rachel felt tears sliding down her face. You're right. I know you're right. I've been thinking only about myself my whole life, about my image, my status, my followers. I never thought about how I made other people feel. And now you're facing consequences, Marcus said. Your posts are viral, your sponsors are gone. People are judging you the way you judged others. How does it feel? Terrible, Rachel whispered. It feels terrible. Good, Marcus said, not unkindly. Maybe that terrible feeling will teach you something. Maybe it will make you think twice before mocking someone. Maybe it will make you treat the next person with kindness, regardless of how they look or where they sit. I want to change. I really do. Marcus closed his laptop. He turned to face Rachel fully. Change isn't something you want, it's something you do. It takes work. It takes looking at the ugly parts of yourself and deciding to be better. Most people never do that work. They just make excuses and blame others. Will you forgive me? Rachel asked, her voice small. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Forgiveness isn't something I can give you in 5 minutes. You hurt people with your words and actions. Not just me, but probably others you don't even remember. Forgiveness takes time, and it requires real change, not just words. Rachel nodded, wiping her eyes. She had hoped for easy forgiveness, for Marcus to say everything was fine and make her feel better. But he was right. She did not deserve easy forgiveness. She deserved to feel uncomfortable. She deserved to face what she had done. Marcus opened his laptop again and returned to his work. The conversation was over. Rachel turned back to her seat and stared out the window at the clouds below. Meanwhile, the viral spread of her story continued. News websites picked it up. Influencers' racist comments toward Billionaire backfire spectacularly. Marcus Chen shows grace after being mocked on flight. Woman loses sponsorships after mocking tech CEO. The Aviation Innovation Summit in London heard about the incident. Conference organizers reached out to Marcus to make sure he was okay and to offer support. They also released a statement. "We stand with Marcus Chen and condemn all forms of discrimination. Mr. Chen's contributions to aviation safety have saved countless lives. He deserves respect, as does every person regardless of their appearance or background." Marcus's company stock actually went up slightly. Investors saw how Marcus handled pressure and prejudice with dignity. They saw his character. And character, in the business world, had value. Back in economy class, Jamal Williams was on his phone, reading about what had happened. He saw the news articles. He saw people defending Marcus and criticizing Rachel. He looked at the business card Marcus had given him and felt a surge of hope and determination. If Marcus Chen could face that kind of treatment and still succeed, still help others, still maintain his dignity, then Jamal could face whatever challenges came his way too. He opened his laptop and started working on his college application essays with new energy. Jennifer Hayes was not on the plane anymore, but her troubles were just beginning. The airline had launched a full investigation into her conduct. They reviewed footage from other flights she had worked. They found a pattern. She had questioned several other black and brown passengers over the years. She had made assumptions. She had treated people differently based on their appearance. The airline's CEO released a public statement. "We apologize to Mr. Chen and to any passenger who has experienced discriminatory treatment on our flights. We are committed to comprehensive anti-bias training for all staff members. The employee involved has been terminated, and we are reviewing our policies to ensure this never happens again." Jennifer sat in her home, reading this statement on her computer. Her husband had barely spoken to her since she got home. Her children asked why she was crying. She tried to explain but could not find the words. She had not thought of herself as a racist person. She had black friends. She had voted for black politicians. She donated to charities that helped poor communities. But when she saw Marcus Chen in his hoodie and jeans, she had made instant assumptions. She had questioned him in ways she never questioned white passengers. And now her 12-year career was over. The flight continued across the Atlantic. Passengers ate their meals. They watched their movies. They slept under thin airline blankets. But the energy in the first-class cabin had changed. People were quieter, more thoughtful. They looked at Marcus Chen with respect. And they looked at Rachel Morrison with pity and judgment. Rachel did not eat. She did not watch movies. She sat in her expensive seat, in her designer clothes, with her diamond earrings, and felt more poor than she had ever felt in her life, because she had lost something more valuable than money. She had lost her reputation. She had lost people's respect. She had lost her sense of who she was. And as the plane carried her across the ocean toward London, Rachel Morrison realized that she had a choice to make. She could spend the rest of her life being bitter and playing the victim, or she could do the hard work of actually changing. The question was, which person did she want to be? 4 hours into the flight, Rachel made a decision. She opened her phone and typed out a message. Not a defensive explanation, not an excuse-filled apology, just simple, honest words. She posted it to all her social media accounts. "I was wrong. I treated someone with cruelty and prejudice today. I have no excuse. I am taking time away from social media to reflect on my behavior and work on becoming a better person. To everyone I've hurt with my words and actions, I'm sorry, and I'm going to do better." Then she turned off her phone. She did not wait to see the responses. She did not check the likes or comments. For the first time in years, she disconnected completely. It was a small step, but it was a start. 1 year passed. Marcus Chen stood in line at the airport again, waiting to board another flight. It was the same route, New York to London, the same airline. But everything else had changed. He wore his usual comfortable clothes, jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie. Some things about Marcus never changed. He still believed that comfort mattered more than appearance. He still preferred to blend in rather than stand out. But the airline had changed. As Marcus approached the gate, he noticed something different. Every passenger, whether in first class or economy, was greeted with the same warm smile by the gate agents. They checked tickets efficiently but respectfully. There was no questioning, no suspicion, no assumptions based on how people looked. Inside the plane, flight attendants wore small pins on their uniforms. The pins read, "Respect has no class." It was part of the airline's new initiative, launched after the incident with Marcus. Every employee had gone through extensive anti-bias training. The airline had partnered with Marcus's company to develop the program. The training taught employees to recognize their unconscious biases. It showed them real examples of discrimination in air travel. It gave them tools to treat every passenger with equal dignity. And it worked. In the past year, discrimination complaints had dropped by 73%. Marcus took his seat in first class 2A again. He pulled out a different book this time, but it was just as worn and loved as the last one. A flight attendant approached with a genuine smile. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Chen. It's wonderful to have you flying with us today. Can I get you something to drink before we take off?" "Water would be great, thank you." "Of course. I'll be right back with that." The flight attendant returned quickly with his water. She treated the passenger across the aisle exactly the same way, with warmth and professionalism. Marcus noticed. He always noticed. As other passengers boarded, Marcus thought about everything that had happened in the past year. The incident on the flight had gone viral, just as these things do in the modern world. But Marcus had used that attention for good. He had given interviews on major news networks. He talked about the everyday discrimination faced by Black professionals. He shared stories not just about himself, but about doctors, lawyers, teachers, and parents who were judged by their appearance rather than their character. He used his platform to amplify voices that usually went unheard. His company had launched a $50 million scholarship fund. It provided full college tuition for students from underserved communities who wanted to study science, technology, engineering, or mathematics. The first group of scholarship recipients would start college in just a few months. 100 students from 50 different states, all getting a chance they might not have had otherwise. Jamal Williams was among them. The teenager had sent Marcus his transcripts and resume the day after that flight. Marcus had been impressed. Jamal had participated in the summer internship program and excelled. He learned quickly, asked good questions, and worked harder than some employees twice his age. Now Jamal was preparing to attend Stanford University on a full scholarship from Chen Global Technologies. He had started a YouTube channel documenting his journey from economy class to tech intern to college student. His videos inspired thousands of young people who faced similar challenges. Marcus smiled thinking about Jamal. That was what made everything worthwhile. Not the money or the fame or the awards, but the real impact on real people's lives. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from David Park, the airline manager who had handled the situation that day. David had been promoted to vice president of customer experience. His job now was to ensure every passenger felt respected and valued. The message read, "Mr. Chen, I just wanted you to know that we've had 0 discrimination incidents this month. Your training program is working. Thank you for partnering with us to create real change." Marcus replied, "That's excellent news. Keep up the good work." He put his phone away and looked around the cabin. More passengers were boarding now. An elderly woman with a cane moved slowly down the aisle. A flight attendant immediately helped her, offering an arm for support and making sure she got to her seat safely. The attendant did not rush her or show impatience. A young man in a turban and traditional clothing sat in first class, a few rows ahead. No one questioned his ticket. No one gave him suspicious looks. He was simply another passenger, treated with the same courtesy as everyone else. Progress, Marcus thought. Not perfection, but progress. Across the country, in a small apartment in Brooklyn, Jennifer Hayes was getting ready for work. Her new job was at a nonprofit organization that helped people with criminal records find employment. It was a far cry from her old life as a flight attendant, but it was meaningful work. Jennifer had spent the past year facing the hardest truths about herself. She had lost her career, and her marriage had nearly fallen apart. Her husband had told her he could not stay with someone who treated people the way she had treated Marcus Chen. Those words had shattered something inside Jennifer. She had started therapy. She joined a support group for people confronting their own biases and prejudices. She read books about racism, privilege, and unconscious bias. She volunteered at community centers in neighborhoods she had previously avoided or judged. The work was painful. She had to admit that she had been wrong, not just about Marcus, but about so many things. She had made assumptions about people her entire life. She had benefited from systems that gave her advantages while holding others back, and she had never even noticed. Jennifer would never fly as crew again. That door was permanently closed, but she had found a new purpose in helping others who had made mistakes. She taught workshops on recognizing bias. She shared her own story as a warning and a lesson, and slowly, she was becoming someone she could be proud of. She looked at the photo on her wall. It was from a community event last month, where she had helped 30 formerly incarcerated people prepare for job interviews. Their grateful smiles reminded her why she did this work. She could not undo her past, but she could shape her future. In a different part of New York, in a neighborhood with smaller apartments and less glamour, Rachel Morrison was also preparing for her day. She worked at a retail store now, folding clothes and helping customers. It was nothing like her old life of luxury and leisure. Rachel's fall had been spectacular and complete. She had lost everything: her sponsorships, her agency representation, her influencer career, her family's trust, and her fiancé. Her father had cut her off financially, telling her she needed to learn the value of hard work and humility. The first few months had been the hardest. Rachel had felt sorry for herself. She had blamed Marcus Chen for ruining her life. She had played the victim, telling anyone who would listen that she had been treated unfairly. But slowly, very slowly, reality had sunk in. No one had forced her to take those photos. No one had made her write cruel posts. No one had told her to laugh at Marcus's humiliation. She had done all of that herself. Rachel had started attending a support group for people who had been canceled on social media. But she quickly realized that most people in the group still did not understand what they had done wrong. They were angry and defensive. They blamed the internet, cancel culture, or oversensitivity. Rachel left that group. She did not want to spend her life being bitter, so she found a different kind of help. A therapist who specialized in privilege and accountability. A volunteer program at a community center where she taught social media literacy to teenagers, warning them about the dangers of performing cruelty for likes and followers. She was building a new life, a quieter life, a life without followers or sponsors or fake friends. She worked 40 hours a week at the store. She lived in a studio apartment she could barely afford. She took the subway instead of taxis, and slowly she was discovering something surprising. She liked this life better. Without the pressure to perform and post, she could just be herself. She made real friends, people who knew her as Rachel the retail worker, not Rachel the influencer. She learned the names of her regular customers. She helped a coworker learn English. It was not glamorous, but it was real. And for the first time in her life, Rachel felt like she might be becoming a good person. She still thought about Marcus Chen sometimes. She wondered if he ever thought about that flight. She wondered if he knew that his words to her had changed her life. Back on the plane, Marcus finished his water and opened his book. He did not think about Jennifer Hayes or Rachel Morrison very often. They were just two people among many who had judged him over the years. He held no grudge. Grudges took energy, and Marcus preferred to spend his energy on building rather than resenting. The flight attendant's voice came over the speaker. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard. We're honored to have you with us today. Our flight time to London will be approximately 7 hours." The plane filled with passengers, business travelers checking their laptops, families with excited children, solo travelers like Marcus heading to meetings or adventures, and in seat 2B next to Marcus, a young Latina woman sat down nervously. She clutched her boarding pass tightly and looked around the first-class cabin with wide eyes. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, Her backpack looked old but well-loved. Marcus glanced over and smiled. "First time in first class?" The woman nodded. "Yes. I used my miles for an upgrade. I've been saving them for years. I'm going to London for a job interview." "That's exciting. What kind of job?" "Software engineer at a tech company. I'm really nervous." Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "I run a tech company. Send me your resume when you get a chance. We're always looking for talented engineers." The woman took the card and read it. Her eyes went wide. "You're Marcus Chen, from Chen Global Technologies?" "That's me. I know your company. I studied your aviation software in college. It's brilliant." "Thank you. What's your name?" "Maria Rodriguez." "Nice to meet you, Maria. Don't be nervous about your interview. You belong here, remember that." Maria smiled, her nervousness fading. "Thank you, that means a lot." As the plane taxied toward the runway, Marcus returned to his book, but he felt the familiar satisfaction of a moment well spent, a word of encouragement, a business card, a reminder that someone belonged. These were small acts, but small acts, multiplied across thousands of interactions, could change the world. The plane lifted off, climbing into the clear sky. Marcus looked out the window at New York disappearing below. Somewhere down there, Jennifer was helping someone find a job. Rachel was learning to be kind. Jamal was preparing for college. And up here, Maria was heading to an interview that could change her life, carrying a business card and a reminder that she belonged. Marcus Chen settled into his seat and smiled. The flight attendant passed by, offering more water with genuine warmth. The passenger across the aisle nodded respectfully. The cabin was peaceful and equal. This was what change looked like. Not dramatic or flashy, just simple, consistent respect. One flight at a time, one person at a time, one act of dignity at a time. And as the plane soared across the Atlantic carrying hundreds of people toward their destinations, Marcus Chen opened his book and continued reading. Just another passenger. Just another day. Just another opportunity to show that respect, kindness, and grace cost nothing but mean everything. The story that had begun with laughter and insult ended with quiet dignity and hope. Because that was always how real change happened. Not with revenge or bitterness, but with patience, wisdom, and the belief that people could be better. And Marcus Chen had always believed in people. That was his real superpower. Not his billions or his technology, but his unshakable belief that everyone deserved respect, and that the world could always be better than it was today.